Giuliani, and this is America's Mayor Live. Me. See, right here. And I'm at the beach. And Ted decided that I should show you what a good swimmer I am. I'm going to go in there and swim right, just straight out.
Are you a good swimmer?
Reasonably good. I'm a better swimmer than I think because I was always intimidated by my father and uncle who were unbelievable swimmers. And when I look at that, all these memories come back of the many times I was at the beach with my father and my uncle who taught me how to swim. When I was a little boy, we started at Coney Island, and then we graduated to Jones Beach, and then my grandmother had a summer house, and that was like for 12 years, and we would go swim all the time. So swimming was a big part of when I was young in the summer. And very often with my father and my uncle. And they were incredible swimmers. My father used to do this to get my mother nervous.
Okay.
And to kind of get, this feeling that she really missed him and loved him. But he'd go in the ocean, like that one, but up in New York, and he'd just swim. He'd get so far out you could hardly see him. And then she would start getting nervous. She'd say, Harold, come back, please. And she would say to me, what? I said, I can't get out there. The only one who could get out there and get him back was my uncle, who was 19 years younger than my father, and I don't know, 20 years older than me, I guess. And he was sort of almost like my brother. But even there was a point at which, of course, this didn't happen. But even when my father, who was 19 years older than him, was sort of a little bit of an older guy, and my uncle was a very, very in shape war hero and police hero. My father could outswim him by a little bit. It used to drive my uncle crazy. But my father learned how to swim in the East River, right where the whirlpools are. And when I would say to my uncle, how did you guys learn how to swim so well? He said, because if you didn't, you'd be killed. So you really learn. But in any event, let me just begin by repeating one thing really quick, because if you listen to the earlier show, we spent a lot of time on this, but I really have to say it. This sheriff in Pima County has got to go. I mean, this interference with the FBI is outrageous. And I have mixed feelings about the FBI. I have to confess, if this were 10 years ago, I'd be totally prejudiced. I love the FBI. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an FBI agent. I was the first, as I used to say in the advertisements, I was the first kid in my block to have the junior FBI badge, which I sent in for with some kind of coupons. And I used to listen to the FBI on the radio and then on television. And then, of course, I had the great opportunity of working with them on some of their biggest cases ever in their history. And then, of course, what happened with them, which was I'll never forgive the people who disgraced the FBI. But that's a different story. Here's a thing that's been pristine throughout. And if you don't know this, you don't belong in law enforcement. The laboratory in Quantico is by far the very best forensic laboratory in the country, in which there may be several who are as good or almost as good, or there may be several in certain areas that are a little bit better. But it's right up there. I don't know what laboratory he's using, this guy. What's his name? Sheriff Dopey?
Chris Nanos.
Yeah, Sheriff, I want the microphone. Because this is what it's about. It's all about this thing. And what he's done is unforgivable. Messing up the crime scene is unforgivable. And it comes from the fact that he didn't bring professionals in at the first moment. Who are the professionals? Everybody in law enforcement knows, the FBI. Even if you discount what happened to them, and you say Cash hasn't straightened them all out yet, and I'm not sure he hasn't straightened them all out yet, but that's irrelevant. It never affected Quantico. He wants to do DNA analysis. Who started DNA analysis in the United States? Who taught half the DNA analysts all around the country? The FBI. And this comes from a guy who ran the New York City Police Department, 4 uncles who were cops, who like to feel they're better than the FBI. And in some ways they are, and in some ways they're not. But I have to tell you, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind, this is not just Rudy Giuliani, this is any mayor and any police commissioner I can think of, except maybe for the communists now. If there were a kidnapping, immediately you bring the FBI in, 100%. I saw it happen. I mean, I did it, and I did it on both sides. You bring them in because they're for the New York City Police Department, they're value added. For him, they're critical. He runs a police department of 600 cops. How many kidnappings do you think that guy did in his life? I mean, he got nice hair, but I don't know what kind of what he's done for kidnappings. Has he ever had a kidnapping before? I don't know. I doubt it. If he did, it's 1 or 2. He's got an agency in Washington that almost began doing kidnappings with a laboratory that is arguably the best in the world. And he's using some laboratory in Florida, and I got to scratch my bald head to figure out what the hell is he skipping over all those states to delay things by sending things to Florida. He doesn't have laboratories even in between. What about Los Angeles? Jesus, Los Angeles is one of the great police departments in the country. The sheriff's office is a hell of a lot bigger than his little sheriff's office. And I'm sure he's got great men and women working for him. But there were only 600 of them that are cops. I had 41,000, jackass. And I would use the FBI. And so would all my police commissioners. Bratton, Safer, and Carrick. A kidnapping, FBI immediately. Terrorism, FBI immediately. We're not worried about, are we going to get on the microphone or... What are you going to get on the microphone to announce? How you screwed up the crime scene? How you held back evidence from the legendary greatest investigative agency for kidnappings? We will never know how much damage that guy did. I have no idea what his political background is. I never even bothered to see whether he's a Democrat or a Republican or whatever the hell he is. But he should resign. He should get himself the hell out of there. He does not know what he is doing. Okay. So let's get to the things that you need to know, because we're going into the weekend, and we got to operate like I do with all my friends, and I talk to them, and meaning all my friends who do this kind of thing. I don't know. I guess we have to call ourselves right-wing commentators or whatever, conservative. I think we're just honest, but okay.
Right. And well,
good.
Well, maybe before we start going into the news of the...
Oh, man, I've been wanting to cover this story forever. Jan Yakovlek. Is that right? Did I get that right? Yeah, he's got I can't. He's got like a thing here to show me how to pronounce Jan's name, but there's no reason to know how to pronounce him. The work that and I've read Kill to Order. Jan, first of all, thank you for your contribution to humanity, because your book is more than your book and analysis is more than that. It's a contribution to humanity about a regime that's almost impossible to contemplate. I mean, so what Jan has investigated more thoroughly than I think anyone is the practice in China, which I think is hard for people to believe, of extracting organs from live human beings. So they become by far the biggest purveyors of organs in the world, and they're making a fortune on it. But they're also getting to kill their enemies this way. I mean, this is like what they did with COVID. I mean, they got to kill a whole bunch of us, and they've got away with it, millions. So tell us about this, Jan, because a lot of people, more people know about it now because of you and Epoch Times, but a lot of people don't know about this. And believe me, they're going to take a little while to accept this. This is so horrendous.
Rudy, first of all, thank you so much for that opening. And I'm thinking about one of the great researchers in this field. He finished his PhD thesis a couple of years back. He calls this whole program something called he calls it extractive repression. And you made a really good point there. On the one hand, there's this financial gain. It's an estimated $9 billion annual industry in the murder of people for organs. Okay, that's the one side. On the other hand, there's the accomplishment of getting rid of the enemies of the Chinese Communist Party. So this is happening simultaneously. So let me give you kind of the very quick view of what really happens and why this is different from your typical black market organ trade that happens horribly, of course, in different parts of the world. This is something where you actually need a state actor to be involved, someone who can push massive coercive power through a population. Okay, you need to be able to dehumanize a sizable group of people, and you can only do that through this kind of state mass propaganda. And also, you need to be able to incarcerate a significant group of people, like say 1 million, like a large group, right? And this is what the Chinese Communist Party did to the Falun Gong back in 1999. So now we're going back 26, 27 years, okay? In communist societies, there's always someone that's the internal enemy. The external enemy is always America, by the way. Okay,
Yeah.
but the internal enemy is different, depending on what's convenient for the Communist Party. And in 1999, that group became a spiritual discipline called Falun Gong or Falun Dafa, based on truthfulness, compassion, tolerance. And the thing that's really interesting about this group is that it's unusually, let's say, grassroots, unusually bottom up, kind of like the opposite of what you would think of in a communist society, which is, I kind of describe it as obscenely hierarchical. Everything kind of comes down from the Politburo Central Committee, right? And there's the expectation that everyone follows those hierarchical dictates. This didn't fit. It grew in a grassroots way to be larger than the Chinese Communist Party, 70 to 100 million people doing it. The regime, the dictator at the time, Jiang Zemin, decided to wipe it out. And this is what they did, right? They pushed that.
Just remind people, what we're talking about the late 1990s now?
Correct, 1999. And by the way, this wiping out, it didn't mean like kill everybody. It just meant, get rid of the practice. So it could have been, brainwash them, force them to renounce their beliefs, and of course, if they don't, well, then more difficult measures can be used, right?
So many people listening probably have been subjected to the propaganda that the Falun Gong, which they might remember, are people who demonstrate and from the very beginning, I thought they were really beautiful. But in any event, a lot of people think they're a cult, or they're really just a religion of peace, or a philosophy of peace. And in a horrible environment, people are crying out for that. They're crying out for some form of just being a human being.
No, Rudy, absolutely. And, this is actually an ancient practice, since time immemorial. And, it's interesting what you observed, right? I realized, especially during the COVID years, right, that propaganda actually works on a certain group of people. Like you can actually convince people. I mean, see, I always thought, when I thought about communist societies, that most people don't believe that. But when I saw, what happened when mass propaganda was pushed through our system and how many people believe that, right? It was kind of shocking. And I really understood a lot better how communism works. By the way, the reason my name is difficult to pronounce, just for the record, is my parents escaped communist Poland in the 70s. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, I kind of figured that. Well, my name is difficult to pronounce too. So I'm
a little bit.
Yours a little harder, but
it's just you've got a bit more TV time than I do.
You can't imagine, right? You can't imagine how much I respect the Polish people. I was part of the Reagan administration. When Poland, when we started in 1981, Poland was an occupied country, probably one of the most Catholic countries in the world, that wasn't allowed to practice their religion except surreptitiously, with the cardinals and the Pope persecuted. And by the time we got to 1990, I was able to go to Prague and go to a Catholic church and have communion. And you should know that I played a big role in raising the money for the Ronald Reagan statue in Poland.
Wow, that's
I
amazing.
was on the
Well,
board of the museum, and I was very, very proud. It's Poland has a special place in my heart. Every time I go there, the first thing I do is go into a Catholic church.
well, and polls, just for the record, right? It's very hard to find a poll that doesn't respect one, Ronald Reagan, but especially Pope John Paul II.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
But so just going back to this whole situation, right? Remember, right? You have in this particular organ harvesting scenario, okay, you have people who have been dehumanized and incarcerated en masse. And then what they started to do in this extractive repression process is they basically started blood typing, tissue typing, organ scanning them, and they created a database, okay? And then before 2006, before we first publicized the reality that this was happening, before I was convinced it was real, there were actually ads online. There were ads online that would say, in 2 weeks, I can get a new heart if I've got the right amount of cash. I think it was at that time like 150 grand. I can't remember the exact number. The only way this could be possible, scheduled 2 weeks in advance, a heart transplant, is because the so-called donor, okay, was already in a database typed matched to me, and they would be killed to order, which is actually the name of my book.
Yeah, hard to
Okay.
believe. I mean,
Yeah.
it takes a little while and a little reading and thinking and to accept. It's very hard. When I first heard this, it took me probably took me a couple of weeks to get to
You
it.
and me both. You and me both, right?
And,
I mean,
even knowing how evil they are. I mean, I came into it knowing, not being naive at all about China. It's just hard to believe that they actually kill people to take out a heart, a lip, a kidney. And now,
there's actually,
aren't they doing it now to keep themselves alive forever, or some?
you know what? This was the crazy thing. So I've been looking at this issue on and off for the better part of 20 years. You know, this book is kind of a product.
You
I
look
did
too
some,
young.
what's well, I did some of the original reporting on it back in 2006 when a couple of different whistleblowers came forward with it, and I realized it was real, right? But it never occurred to me until this year, alluding to this hot mic moment between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin that happened in
a couple
Tiananmen
months
Square.
ago, right?
100%. And so, you know what? Let me recount roughly what happened. Okay, so Putin says to Xi, or pardon me, Xi says to Putin, "When we're 70 these days, we're just a baby," right? And then Putin says to Xi, "Through continual organ transplantation, perhaps we can achieve immortality," right? And then Xi says to Putin, roughly, "Our target is 150 years." And then when I heard this, okay, a light bulb. First of all, my phone was going off the hook after this, right? And because people knew what I'd been working on, and a light bulb went off. See, 150 years, you can think of it like a code word in a way for China's longevity project for the super elites. It's called Project 981. So I always knew that I knew for a while that this project existed. And in fact, the Chinese super elites do live quite a bit longer. And you kind of wonder why. And all these years, it never occurred to me, in fact, that part of it is because they have unlimited on-demand organs available to them forever, right? And what is that worth? Is that worth $9 billion? Or is that worth probably more than $9 billion, right? If you're a Chinese super elite with extremely loose morals, right? So this is unfortunately part of the incentives reality, right? Yes, there's a lot of Westerners that go. Yes, there's Taiwanese and South Koreans and and of course a lot of people from super elites from inside China. But when you're in that upper echelon, right,
Of the Communist Party,
essentially you have this, and I hate to say this is so horrible, but you have this stable of people kind of waiting to be killed at your need, right? And
so how many? So where is it exclusively the Falun Gong they do this with, or
so
do
this
they?
is the horrible
I
thing.
always thought the Falun Gong was the main source, and then they spread it out a little bit. They take others.
100%. So, well, they built it on the backs of the Falun Gong. See, in 2000, there was this organ industry in China was tiny, and then so in 1999, 2000, they start persecuting the Falun Gong. They do that mass incarceration, and the organ industry just skyrockets, grows geometrically until 2005. They build thousands of transplant hospitals, mass transplantation begins, and it sort of plateaus there and stays kind of at a pretty high level from around 2005 onwards, growing a little bit. So, and then nobody kind of does anything until 2014. There's even international transplant organizations that kind of run cover for it in a way. I mean, we could debate why or understand why, but basically no one does much, with a few exceptions.
From 1999, 2000 until 2014,
2015.
They were engaged in this kind of regular. It was a very, very profitable.
They've been engaged in it since to today. It's just that what happened in 2014 and 2015, two things happened. Okay, one is they initially said, "Oh no, we don't use prisoners for organs. How dare you suggest that?" 2014, 2015, they say, "Actually, we did use prisoners, but we don't anymore." So they changed their tune completely. Okay, but the other part is, because no one really did much, they added a new group. And you've heard about the genocide of the Uyghur people, a very vulnerable group in the northwest of China. Okay, and there's even Ethan Gutman, another one of these hero researchers that wrote a book called The Slaughter back in the day. Okay, that was one of the definitive books on this organ harvesting, mainly from Falun Gong. He's now writing another book called The Xinjiang Procedure, which documents the detail of how this has added this other group, which, the Uyghurs, to the mix. And he even has this example where they built basically a hospital, a prison, and a crematorium all kind of side by side in Xinjiang, right? Where it just kind of, presumably facilitating this process.
Where is this in China?
So Xinjiang is the northwest of China. It's a mountainous region, and it's under full military control. And it makes it, in a way, it makes this group even more vulnerable, because it's only like, I think, 12 million people total, and they're in a very isolated region, and they're an ethnic minority. It's very easy.
We're talking now about the Uyghurs.
Correct. Exactly. So we believe that it's the Falun Gong and the Uyghurs are really the main communities that are involved, that are being used this way. But here's the horrible thought, right? Is that this spreads, right? If you don't deal with it, it moves to new groups, right? I've heard, I'm not going to tell, I don't even know if I want to introduce this, but I've heard of it, basically children being used. And why, like, what would stop new groups, that are increased, that persecution is increasing against? Like, we've heard about the increase of the persecution of Christians, right? And so
I can't imagine that they don't occasionally go after.
Well, I'm sure occasionally, but the point is here that like these crimes against humanity, this stuff doesn't stay isolated to the one group that's originally demonized and targeted. It spreads. Right. This is what always happens, right? And I'm really concerned as I'm watching the Christian persecution ramping up in China, right, with the Zion Church, and now most recently, there's been this sort of like all the Catholic clergy are supposed to, in recent days, start to submit all their documents for control by the state and so forth. I mean, it's just, I'm just concerned that this is going to add, they're going to add yet another group, which is just what has happened in the past. So and we're in a unique situation right now, I think, where, like, to my eye, right, because this is so horrible, as you pointed out rightfully, okay, and over the years when I've talked to people about it, a lot of people will just clue out from the conversation, and I didn't blame them, because I know they didn't want to know, they didn't want to understand. Like, I get it, right? But today, for some reason, maybe it's because there's actually a survivor of this, and that's an amazing story in itself. I write about that in Killed to Order, in my book. Someone has a giant gash in his side, and they took part of his liver and lung, and almost miraculously he lived to tell the tale. And also we had the COVID years, and the COVID years kind of taught us that people can do really crazy things.
I mean, the COVID years educated me too, I have to tell you. I mean, I've always there's a copy of your book there. You got to read this. I mean, it's hard. I've read about a third of your book so far, getting ready for this interview. I'm going to read the rest of it over the weekend.
Well, I really appreciate that.
Very well written, and please, I'm going to tell my audience, easy to read. He's a good writer. The good writer is a writer who makes it accessible to you. He doesn't.
The first copies have just been printed, so it comes out on March 17th.
Yeah, I've got an advanced copy of it.
Yeah. So, and I mean, there's the biggest part of the book, by the way, Rudy, and I think you will appreciate this, is that it's not just this about this industry, which of course is critical, but I realized at one point that this industry is actually the perfect lens with which to understand how
Yes.
not only communism in China works, but communism period works.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely right. And here's the basic part of it: complete disrespect, almost like hostility to human life, because human life might stand in the way of their achieving their objectives. And therefore, they want to remove from you any of this feeling. You know how Western civilization is really characterized by the word humanities, the humanities? They're just the opposite. And they want to rip that from us. They want us not to feel empathy for the human being or the value of the human life, which is why they remove God and they remove parents. And so if you got to, most people obviously haven't read Marx. And when I was educated, I went to a Catholic college, of course. We were educated in what communism is, which included this horrible. I mean, it's an ideology that's anti-human, and they make people anti-human. I mean, these people think human life exists for the purpose of expanding the power of the Chinese communists. So do these.
You're nailing it.
The strangest thing is, I hate to get you involved in this because I'm very involved in it right now. It kind of meets the Quran right in the middle. The true Islamic believes that human life has no value unless you're a believer, and therefore human life stands in the way. If the human life stands in the way of spreading Muhammad and Islam, you eliminate it.
Well, you know what's interesting? Like I've actually met people that have kind of a range of views across of Islam, because like, for example, the Uyghur people, right, that are being genocided, right? They're 100%. Muslim, right? And yes. and at the same time, they're called extremists, but that has not been remotely 100%. My experience. Right.
There are large numbers, like hundreds of millions of Muslims who do not accept that. They don't even know it's in the Quran. But if you want to use it as the extremists do, it is there. And Muhammad did teach it. And somehow we're going to have to face up to that at some point. But it doesn't, some large percentage, I have no idea what percentage of the Muslim people, just as human beings, reject all that. But not the large number that are going around killing people. So now the Red Chinese focus on Uyghurs. They go after because they're Muslim, right?
Well, I think they go after them because they're convenient.
They're convenient.
Because as I said, right, they're a minority. They're in an area which has a lot of minerals where they want total control. They're actually pushing assimilationist policies. They're putting lots of Han Chinese into the region. They're forcing people to marry. They're preventing people from actually practicing their faith. A similar thing they do with other faiths, right? And of course they use the example of this extremism, which sometimes may be the case, maybe in some isolated cases is the case. But what I'm trying to say is that I think from the communist perspective, right, they'll use any narrative that's convenient to achieve their objective, which you actually pointed out really well earlier, is true. The supremacy and the total control of the Chinese Communist Party. And any human life is available to be sacrificed in the pursuit of that goal.
Well, I have to ask you this. I hate to introduce this subject, but are you worried about your safety?
You know, it's I'll tell you something funny. You know, the more people ask me this, the more I get worried.
I'm an expert in this, so I have to tell you, I worry about but as I hear you talk to me, mm-hmm. I was taught you catch criminals by thinking like them. So I've tried to think like the Chinese communists do. You're a dangerous guy, my friend.
I mean, my answer is I would hope not, But I am, of course, acutely aware of the extreme things the Chinese Communist Party has done and continues to do. And I'm going to make a point of exposing it because, well, we need to, because one of the biggest, I guess, one of the biggest subterfuges, one of the biggest lies all these years, right, has been, that communist China is somehow going to liberalize. It's someone going to become a democracy if we pump enough cash in over there. But their whole purpose all along, right, was to kind of to woo the barbarians, as is the kind of rough translation, right, of what they were doing, right? They had no intention of liberalizing, but they sure wanted to get the American money and the American know-how and the American intellectual property. And, and as I think you actually pointed this out earlier in our talk, right? This communist ideology, this is not China, right? This in itself is a parasitic ideology that has taken over Chinese, imposed itself on Chinese society. And so I think, I actually think the Chinese people, there's a whole thing to talk about here about some of the work the Falun Gong have done in China over the last 25 years, explaining to people this reality that communism isn't China, that narrative of the Communist Party, that we are China, we're responsible for all the great things China has ever done. That's the biggest falsehood ever, that China actually is a great civilization, but not because of communism, right?
That point is a beautiful and very valid thing that people should realize. And sometimes, when those of us who are opposed to it and talk about it, we fall into the, not that we want to, we fall into the trap of sounding like we're anti-Chinese. Just the opposite. The Chinese culture has been eliminated by them. I had the opportunity, for a whole bunch of reasons I won't bore you with, but of studying communism as a youngster deeply. And they want to eliminate your culture. Even Putin understood that. Putin has written about this, how he's not really a communist because they wanted to eliminate Russian culture. And people don't understand that what Putin really wants to do is recreate Peter the Great, Catherine the Great. He's not even interested in the extra countries that the communists went to take. He's not particularly interested in the old Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia. He's probably interested in Poland because Poland irks him so much. But honestly, Poland would not be part of his pure Russian empire.
Rudy, let me tell you, as a Pole, okay, this is one thing, there's in Poland, the left and the right are fighting each other. And, there's a lot of the similar kind of situations we see in the US and in other places. But on one thing, the left and the right in Poland completely agree. I know. Do not trust Russia. They're gonna come in. Okay. And it's like, it's almost in our blood. We've been sort of run over by both the Russians and the Germans so many times, okay, since time immemorial.
It's our strongest ally in Eastern Europe. And I kind of prefer Eastern Europe right now to Western Europe. But in any event, your book is magnificent. We're going to have you on again because there's a lot to cover here. And people have to read this.
Well,
and not just because of the terrible practice, but probably for the reason you wrote it. They've got to understand what we're facing. This is the group of people that want to overthrow us, replace us as the main culture and civilization in the world. And can you imagine if our children or grandchildren had to live under this? And they're the only ones who have the capacity to do it. So this is real. And thank you for doing it, Jan. Thank you very, very much.
No, Rudy, I super appreciate you having me on.
We're gonna have you on
KillToOrder.com
I just admire you very much for having done this work and having the courage to do it.
Thank you so very much. KillToOrder.com, folks. If you want to pre-order, that's where to get it.
It doesn't look that long, right? It's written. I know it's written in very, very accessible language, so people.
That's right.
And I think there's going to be and it's a window. It's a window into what we're facing. It's a terrible thing in and of itself, but this is much bigger, as you know. And this is an opening to it. God bless you.
Rudy, thank you so very much. What a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it.
Be careful for you and your family. I pray for you.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
I will.
God bless you. That's a real, there are some exceptional human beings who've made great contributions. When you get to read this, you will see this is a great contribution. There are people who just reject this, that China is involved in selling organs on a. This is a massive, profitable industry for the Chinese. There are people in America who use this. I mean, people are so narcissistic that, at 90 years old, they got to keep themselves alive by getting they got to go kill some 25-year-old and get this poor guy's heart. I don't know. I maybe it's having brought up. I think if I did that, I'd go straight to hell. I mean, I think if I paid like $100,000 to get somebody's heart at 90 years old so I could stay alive longer, I'd end up going up to St. Peter, and St. Peter said, "Oh, did you read Dante?" I said, "Yeah, I read Dante. You read about there are three places like the Inferno, and then Purgatorio, and then Il Paradiso." Yeah. Well, you're going to the one down there, okay? So, okay. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. We got to get that book. Here we are, pretty much at the beginning of the process here at this pristine, I call it a laboratory. It's not like a factory, it's like a hospital. This is the beginning of the process for roasting. Deep grain, very good quality. Most people don't use this quality. We deal with small farmers because they like to know who we're dealing with. They give us the highest quality, all organic, non-GMO. You should know all Arabica beans. No Robusto, all Arabica. They're going to go into the roaster and it'll get roasted for about 20 minutes or so. Oh my goodness, look at these. My goodness. You're going to want to specially order these. This is what goes into Rudy's coffee. U.S. Army Major Scott Smiley paid a high price serving our nation. Scott was leading his platoon in Iraq when a blast sent shrapnel through his eyes, leaving him blind and temporarily paralyzed. Scott would become the first blind active duty military officer before medically retiring years later. Thanks to friends like you, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation gave Scott and his family a mortgage-free, specially adapted smart home. Show your support for America's heroes now. Donate $11 a month to Tunnel to Towers at T2T.org.
Are you ready for some action?
I'm ready for action.
Get the Elite TV plan only through the portal. 218 channels, and it's only $69.95 a month,
Wow.
including your free portal.
That's cheaper than everyone else.
Your favorite sports, movies, news,
Wow.
even daytime dramas. We're talking about ESPN, OAN, Newsmax,
Wow.
channels you can't get anymore in certain areas.
Compared to the competition, this is a way better deal.
Endless selection. Not to mention all the free music channels. There's over 700 premium and classic movies all ready to go.
Wow.
Plus, they got catch-up TV that allows you to go back and watch what you've missed or want to watch again. Cut your cable in half and get twice as much for free.
Way more channels for half the cost.
After the first year, the subscription then drops to $57.95 monthly,
Wow.
where you change or upgrade anytime. Go to QUXNow.com and get yours today. Use promo code RUDY. Act fast. These deals are selling out.
About 2 weekends. Well, we're talking about when baseball is going to come back. I think a few of the teams have had pitchers and catchers come down. Theoretically, it really shouldn't happen for about another week. But I think a lot of them are jumping the gun, realizing, look, a lot of winning in baseball, it's probably true of basketball and football too, but I know baseball better, is nowadays it's managing injuries. You got to go into a season knowing You're going to lose some of your players. You're going to lose some of your pitchers. And the art is to have like a stable available of people you can bring up to get through the injuries. Sometimes it may be impossible because the injuries are such critical people, you just can't replace them. But very often they're not. So let's talk about the economy for a minute because it's important. The president spoke about the economy a couple of times in the last 2 days. And what he's emphasizing, first of all, we were really looking toward the inflation numbers today. And the inflation numbers today were, from my point of view, fabulous. January, I just want to give you some perspective here that nobody will give you who's anti-Trump or part of the legacy media, whatever the hell we call them. January is usually 3 out of 4 years, 3 out of 4 periods. January is usually the worst month for inflation. Reason for it? It's the beginning of the year. This is when people raise prices. They look at the prior year. They see whether they should raise or lower prices. They think they can get away. And if they can, they're capitalists and they want to make a profit, right? So they think they can raise prices. Maybe it's a good idea. Maybe it's a bad idea. But you're going to get a little bit of an unnatural boost in prices. With all of that, the inflation for this period, less than anticipated, less than last year, looking like it's on a trend to getting the cost of living under control. And in some areas, it's very, very under control. So the president who doesn't really care where he is to communicate with his people really made that point at Fort Bragg today. And you get an understanding of the fact, I can't say that we haven't had other presidents like this, but not too often. We have a president who really understands our economy. And I think by the time we get to the middle of the year, I don't know, I think you're going to see this. It's booming right now. You just don't realize it. Or at least the press doesn't want to let you realize it. If he was a Democratic president, there'd be headlines. Trump turns around economy in record time. Inflation already at historic levels in which we don't even consider inflation. When you get below 3% inflation, it's not inflation. It's, of course, certain things have to get more expensive as you move along. Real question is, are you keeping up with jobs? Now, what happened this month? With the prayer that the Democrats had that we would have terrible job numbers, we have unbelievably unanticipated high job numbers. Not only are they really good, but from the point of view of those of you who are not communists and those of you who believe in a free market as opposed to a government-controlled market, this is one of the best periods of time we've ever had. We had a decline of 50,000 in government jobs in the last reporting period. 50,000 government jobs gone. And yet we had one of our largest increases in jobs ever because they were all in the private sector. Do you know how much better that is for our economy? That's a total contribution as opposed to a partial contribution. No Democrat, no communist would understand what I'm now saying. What I'm saying is that a government job in terms of our economy it's hard to know if it helps your economy or hurts your economy, right? Because a government job, you're going to pay them for the job, and then you're going to collect taxes on it. And the net to the federal government is the difference between the two things. Now, same person, goes out to the private sector and probably gets paid more, like 200,000 instead of 90,000, right? And all of it, from the federal government's point of view, is net to the federal government. They're not paying you to earn the 200,000. Whereas if you have the government job before you make 100, they're paying you. They're paying you the 100,000. So I don't think that the Marxist-educated rapporteurs of our economy, not enough of them get this, how extraordinary the numbers are this month. But to me, they tell me that by the middle of the year, we're going to be, we're going to have mourning. We already have mourning in America. We just don't realize it, Ted.
I agreed.
I'm ready. I mean, the man who did mourning in America has since died. A great man. I'll tell you all about him if you want. But we got to go find somebody who can do that again, because there's no way we should turn this government back over to the damn communists in the Democrat Party. Just from the point of view of your good, my good, and our children, we're on a roll right now. For the few things that are holding back, I can tell you how they're going to, I can tell you and I can predict when they're going to turn around by the policies that are there. Almost, there are very few of them. I mean, enough things have turned around right now that if the rest don't work, we're still going to have we already are having a remarkable turnaround. 172,000 private sector jobs. You know what the anticipation was? Less than 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's for the left-wing pigeonhead morons who look at our economy from the point of view of emotion. I don't know how they're even economists. They got educated at Yale and Harvard, and God, I should get my money back for paying all that money to Harvard for my kid. But in any event, the reality is that our economy is doing great. Now, all of these Democrats went to Munich. In one way, they can't be totally, completely moronic and stupid. Maybe they are. But in any event, that's the place to be. Munich, the Munich conference that is going on right now, which is largely about defense, not the economy, has more of an impact on the economy than the ridiculously stupid Davos conference, which I have to tell you, I feel like the prophet Isaiah about that. I was invited to Davos constantly when I was mayor. And my staff, oh, you were invited to Davos, principal speaker. What the hell do I want to go there for? It's all bullshit. America shouldn't be guided by a world economy. America we're the only economy in the world that makes any real sense. We should be, and this isn't out of arrogance or anything. This is out of Christian charity. We should be sharing our economic ideas with them rather than submitting to them the way Obama and Clinton and were doing. And, the president's speech 3 weeks ago, I just sat there and clapped. I was here in America, but I just sat there and, wow, finally somebody is telling these jackasses, including the heads of most of our banks and our corporations, how ridiculously scam they were, but because they're really so prone to the press saying nice things about them and the clubs inviting them, and they can't get beyond that. It's really true. I'm telling you that because I've seen it from the inside, and I want to share that with you. We got to get beyond that. And I think people instinctually understand that Trump is doing that. So here they are in Munich. I gotta play for our people, Chad, what I had on the earlier show, for fear that they weren't watching the earlier show. This unbelievable word salad from AOC to kind of show you she's as stupid as I tell you. This is a very ignorant, ill-educated, poorly educated, silly person who probably wasn't even a particularly good bartender. Now, just listen to this. This is about Taiwan. I swear to God, if I were having a conversation with a normal bartender in Manhattan, he'd give a better answer to this than she did.
Here is AOC in Munich.
And should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to?
I remember it as long as they hear it.
You know, I think that this is such a, I think that this is this is, of course, a very longstanding policy of the United States. And I think what we are hoping for is that we want to make sure that we never get to that point. And we want to make sure that we are moving in all of our economic research and our global positions to avoid any such confrontation and for that question to even arise.
Would and should.
You don't have them answer questions. I just said to Ted, what do you do with somebody if they're your candidate and they're ill-educated and stupid? You don't have them answer questions. I mean, well, I'm not going to spend, time on the rest, but the rest of it's just like this. It's word salad because she doesn't know the answer because she's either so poorly educated, she has no idea what's going on with Taiwan. Or number two, she's inherently dumb, which could be possible. I can't tell yet which it is with her. Is it a bad education or is it a significantly dumb mind? I tend to think it's the first because she tactically makes some decisions that are kind of sharp, So I don't know if it's the product of an absolutely horrible woke education. And by the way, she didn't grow up poor. She grew up solidly middle class, which a lot of these people don't tell you. Like Mondani grew up rich. Now, Mondani should be in jail for the 18, 19 people who died because of freezing, who would not have died under the last 70 years of mayors of New York City, of which I was only one, some of which were the dumbest people you ever met. Couple of those, and a couple of them were maybe as corrupt as you ever met, but at least they had a little bit of a conscience. They didn't like to see people die of freezing on the street. This guy has no conscience, and it's for the reason that I was talking about with Jan, because he's a communist. Don't you get it? He doesn't care about human life. It doesn't matter. All that matters is communism prevailing, his ideology prevailing. This is kind of profound, and that's not profound. I don't have to say anything that's profound, but this is a little hard to grasp. But maybe even with the little time we have, I can get away with this. Karl Marx and the communists commit the original sin. What's the original sin? The original sin is Eve and then Adam being convinced by the serpent, Satan, that if they eat of the tree of truth and knowledge, right, they can be smarter than God or as smart as God, and that God put them there and deprived them of that knowledge because he wanted to subjugate them, I guess, or control them. Right? So Eve said, I want to be smarter than God or as smart as God. So she ate the apple and then she gave it to a beautiful, 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 unbelievably powerful description of what Karl Marx did. And he knew it. Karl Marx knew he was satanic. He even wrote it. Communists reject God because they believe they're smarter than God. and they think you're all stupid for believing in God. And they really know. But if you ask them to really explain to you, how does the world begin? It's really an excuse to exercise their pathological narcissism. In the case of Marx, a man was mentally ill, as was Engels. And I can sort of demonstrate for the rest of them that follow that they are. And for those who follow it now, it's anywhere from a mild degree of mental illness to a very strong one that drives them. And all of it is the egotism of believing they're smarter than God and clearly smarter than you. Now, if you deal with liberals a lot, like I have growing up in New York, having been a Democrat, but never really a liberal, but a Democrat, they are very, very condescending. Oh, that's even a kind word of us, because they believe that we're mentally and intellectually limited by the fact that we have to believe in God. And they don't accept the wisdom that goes back to non-religious philosophers and thinkers like Aristotle and Plato. That the beginning of wisdom is knowing that your knowledge is limited, that you don't know. So the Greek and pro Aristotle and Plato and philosophers would have attributed this to human arrogance, and as religious people, we would attribute it to the fact that there's a lot in the world that we don't know and we don't understand. Communists do not have that humility. They believe they understand everything. They don't, so they make it up. And then they subject you to their thinking, and you must accept it. So that's what's happening tragically to my great city, New York, as the mayor sits there in the beautiful residence of Gracie Mansion and the unbelievably palatial city hall, and he watches people die on the street of unbelievably cold winter, and he doesn't do anything about it. And you say to yourself, how can he do that? Because he really isn't a human being in the sense of humanities, understanding the value of human life, empathizing with the value of human life, because he's both, in his case, it's really serious. He's both a communist and apparently seems to be a great supporter of Islamic extremism, which is the most extreme reading of the Quran, which would tell him to be like that. So Russia, we should know, and you should be aware of the fact that Russia is threatening to send oil to Cuba. Don't know that they've done it. I'm sure a lot of people in Washington and elsewhere are watching this very closely. But we have created an embargo, basically, on sending oil to Cuba, because we want to overthrow the atheistic, inhumane, indecent, murderous, homicidal Castro regime that still exists in Cuba, and save the Cuban people, finally. And this suggests that Russia, now they've been cut off for oil. In about 10 days, they're not going to have any at all. And Russia is threatening to send oil there. The question is, what do we do about it? Mm-hmm. So you've got a confrontation there with Russia, independent of what's going on elsewhere in Ukraine or well, they're really not involved in the Middle East. They're too frightened to be involved in the Middle East. They don't have the resources to be. You should know that Senator Cornyn, who is in a very, very difficult race with a good friend of mine, but I like John Cornyn, and I disagree with John Cornyn. So but I don't get like I don't reject a whole human being because I disagree with him on politics or whatever. He's a good man. John Cornyn is a good man. He may be, some people say he's a rhino. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But that doesn't mean you have to hate him. It means you have to disagree with him. Well, so John Cornyn wants to pass a law to prohibit Sharia law. Because in his state of Texas, they're trying to can you believe it, in Texas? They're trying to impose Sharia law in certain counties and areas of Texas? Are you crazy? Sharia law is on its face a violation of the United States Constitution, which John, who was a judge and a good lawyer, realizes that he wants to pass a law prohibiting that for the whole country. You're not allowed in Michigan, where the Muslims push you around. You're not allowed to substitute Sharia law for the law of the United States of America, or any other law for the law of the United States of America. I think we should pass that. Let the Democrats vote on that. They'll be too scared to vote against Sharia law. Even though Sharia law says, to this day, you should stone women who commit adultery. You know what adultery is defined? I mean, my goodness, if you get raped, you get stoned. If you get raped, you get stoned. That's what Muhammad taught them. I'm not making that up. I'll go get my book out and read it to you. We'll do it another time. I don't know completely the good guy, bad guy thing that's going on between Trump and Bibi. And I'm not privy to it, even though both of them are old friends and people I think I know pretty well. But I know that's what's going on. It happened before. And even the people in the regime of terror in Iran have said, a couple of them have said in quotes that have come out, I guess, as what we would call leaks. They've said that the last time he bombed us, meaning Trump, he was negotiating with us and he was disagreeing with Bibi. Well, right now he's negotiating with us and he's disagreeing with Bibi. Maybe they're not so dumb, those crazy, nutty, murderous, homicidal, effing people that we deal with. Right. But there may be something to that. I don't know. I'm just giving you a way to look at it. And let's see. I mean, we got a weekend coming up. The last statement I saw from the president before I came on was that he's unhappy with the progress of the negotiations. You can be unhappy with the result of the negotiation. What could possibly happen? A lying, terrorist, insane, manipulative regime is going to agree and sign a paper in which we're supposed to rely on the fact that they're going to live up to their side of the agreement. Of course they're not. I mean, it's beyond, I mean, no matter how much you want to credit someone, no matter how much benefit, how much rope you want to give them to hang themselves, it's way beyond that now. It is absolutely guaranteed that no matter what they sign, they will not follow, and they will lie about it. And they believe that they should do that. If you study very carefully their set of beliefs, which for different reasons, the teachings of Muhammad come out pretty much on that issue the same way as the teachings of Marx, which is they're allowed to lie, to cheat, and to do anything they can to further the Muslim religion to dominate the world. That's what Muhammad told them to do. Now, if you want to reform, if you want to put that aside, you can, but don't pretend it's not there. The book that Mandami and Ellison swore on, says that. Not fooling me. I've read it numerous times. That's what they're swearing on. So when I see that guy, Ellison, I know what I'm dealing with, and I'm not fooled by him. In Iran right now, they are slaughtering people. Now, we can't say they're doing it on the massive levels they were in January, but they're still doing it. For example, one of the people that they beat the living daylights out of is this lovely woman who is a Nobel laureate called Narges Mohammadi. Narges has been in a very, very careful and I would say a way that would be acceptable to anything but a terrorist animals way, has been raising for years the inequalities and the horrible treatment of women in Iran. In December, she was arrested because she attended a ceremony honoring an Iranian lawyer and human rights advocate. And they arrested her for attending the ceremony. This is a woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2023. And she spent a good deal of the last 12 years in and out of the Irvin prison. Now, you got to understand what the Ivan prison is. Could be the worst prison in the world. And you also should know, because we see this guy entering into it, the Shah's son. It was built by the Shah. They just took it over. I mean, it had all the right torture equipment, so they didn't have to buy any. We just replaced one dictator with another. It may be that the second dictator was worse than the first, but it doesn't negate the fact that the first one killed an awful lot of people and made sure he had a one-party system. And his son, who has nothing else to distinguish himself other than being the son of the murderer of the Iranian people, wants to be part of the country in the future. He has no independent credentials of his own other than being the son of the murdering dictator and the corrupt dictator who took out of that country so much of its wealth that people were starving because of the money they took out. And he lived off it and nothing else because he never worked. Right. So be careful of the new Shah, who is a complete disaster and may very well be being used by the regime to manipulate you. But Narges Mohammadi should be released from prison. And I know the president has made that issue an issue between us and put it on the table. But I think it's only going to happen when we overthrow this insane theocracy. Who knows? I have numerous articles here from papers all over the world speculating how many people they've killed. Let's put it this way. It's an incredible number of people. Maybe more than they ever have done before. Maybe. I mean, because when he first came in, Muhammad wiped out as many of his, really originally, as many of his Confederates as possible, because he double-crossed all of them. He got all these groups to overthrow the Shah. On the theory, he didn't, but I mean, they all overthrew the Shah, really without him. But the theory was that he would come back and he would be like a religious figure in Qom, which is about 70 miles from Tehran, and the religious capital of the Shiite people. And he would just be a scholar opining on the Quran, the horrible Quran, and the hadiths and all the literature that they have in this religion of war and killing, which is what it is. I'm sorry. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not really worried. They already have fatwas on me, of all different kinds. And what are they going to do? Another fatwa? So everything is waiting on the decision of the single most important country in this world, as it should be, the United States of America. Let's see what happens. There's a wonderful article several days ago in the Wall Street Journal that I called to your attention by Arthur Herman, and you can get it online. And it really shows how America has very, very quickly, you can't imagine how great leadership can change things so fast, right? Last night we had the great, wonderful Bolsonaro's son here with us, and he pointed out that within 3 months of Bolsonaro getting elected the first time, they turned around crime. Look what President Trump did. Within 2 months, the border situation, the border part of it was solved. Boom. And now the economy, we're starting to see the results on the economy with the jobs numbers and the inflation numbers this month. The Democrats have got to be sitting there saying, how are we going to spin this? Well, they will. They will. They'll lie. The Times will lie with them. But I think we're every day, every week, every month, we're getting beyond it. Because people are coming to, like, not just me, I'm going to say people like me, 50 like me. They're getting their information and their news from us. They're getting it tested, and they're finding out that we're telling them the truth, and they're lying. And that's a big change from where we were 4 years ago, 8 years ago. And it's our only hope. And next one is to straighten out our education system. Because the reason why our people are so, in the cases of New York or Chicago, or where they keep electing these completely horrible, anti-American, anti-human people, is because they've been brainwashed. And we're beginning to reverse it, and you're helping us do that. So I want you to look at this article, because it will show you that we are ahead of them, and we are going to stay ahead of them, because we got President Trump and all of his people, and we're going to stay ahead of them in the moon race, because there was a real fear that they were going to take over outer space and dominate it. Like hell they are. First of all, everything they do in outer space, everything they do with this kind of complex technology, they stole from us. Look, don't underestimate the Chinese ever. They're very, very smart. But the poor people have been dominated by, you got to memorize what we tell you. Do you know what that does to your ability to be creative? It destroys it. It's the reason they have to steal. And they have for 30 or 40, they got to steal everything from us. Because we are allowed to think. We're allowed to create. They're not. They're allowed to repeat. Otherwise, ba-boom. I know we're going into overtime, and I want to get you over to Dr. Maria, but I got to tell you about the Tumbler Ridge shooter who was trans, because I've got to tell you that we cannot be intimidated into not analyzing the fact there have been a disproportionate number of shootings, mass shootings, by people who are going through this unbelievably sick appeal to young people who begin to have doubts about their gender, to take medicines that do terrible damage to them, and then to mutilate their bodies. This is like the third, fourth murderer like this. You can't escape that. And common sense and logic, oh my God, we don't want that, tell you that that's the case, right? This is a mental illness. This isn't harsh or mean. This is understanding and loving. If you're a male and you're 12, 8, 12, 9, whatever years old, and you start thinking you're a woman, here's the simple fact. You're not. You're not any more a woman than you are George Washington. And it's the same paranoid schizophrenia. You live at war with reality. Maybe I can describe it that way. Here's reality. You're at war with it. That's a mental illness. You're a male. That's what you are. You've got all the sexual organs and other characteristics of a male. Maybe there are some things about you that push a little in the other direction, which is not at all unusual. All of us have, males have certain amount of female characteristics. Females have a certain amount of male characteristics. So there was a great article and column by a woman who was a tomboy. And that was utilized by the scumbags who run this operation to convince her to chop her breasts off at 15 years old. I don't even know if she had breasts at 15 years old, but they chopped it off. Now she's 19 and she's suing. She wants to change back, and she doesn't know if she can. I don't know. You gotta forgive everybody. You gotta love everybody. But these people should go to hell for a while at least, right? How can you do that to a kid? And how can we have gotten ourselves to being so sick and divorced from reality that we can't figure that out? Well, thank God we have President Trump and his administration and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and they're going to reverse, or if they haven't reversed already, this Marxist described gender. What do they call it? Gender treatment or gender reassignment or whatever. You want healthy gender psychology? It is to work with the child to become comfortable with reality, which is really the final goal of sensible psychology and psychiatry. I mean, a great deal of our psychiatric and mental illness is fighting with reality. And it's no different here, except it's been made different. And when you look at the fact, which, man, in Canada, they're going nuts because they're all focusing on the fact that the murderer who murdered first of all, he shot 20, or he shot, it shot, somebody shot 25 people, actually 36 people. Killed 8, plus before it got there, it shot its mother and brother. And this is after what we saw in Nashville, right? Where 6 people were killed, 3 children and 3 adults by a transgender disturbed person. And I'm not going to go through the other ones. I'm not. I'm just going to rely on you to realize that here's the problem. Maybe what we have to do is to get beyond transgender, trans, whatever, all this, and say, just acknowledge the fact this is a mental illness, which we used to do before the left-wing terrorists took over and destroyed science. We used to understand that if you're 14 years old and you're a man and you think you're a woman, this is a defined mental illness and it needs to be treated. You can't submit to it any more than at 14 years old. If I came in and I said to the psychiatrist, I think I'm Abraham Lincoln. And the psychiatrist, oh, great, let me get you an Abraham Lincoln costume. That's what we have going on, right? And the guy for the rest of his life walks around thinking he's Abraham Lincoln until he runs into reality. And then everybody laughs at him and makes fun of him and whatever the hell they do. And it gets worse and worse. Well, never mind. The inflation report, fabulous. Couldn't be better. Everything exceeded expectations year over year. Inflation is down from last year by 2.4%. It's the lowest annual rate since May of 2025. The actual core consumer price index is the lowest it's been since, try this for size, March of 2021. In other words, since Biden ruined it. We've already reversed. If you read that correctly and you understand it, we have reversed about 3 years of Biden's damage done to our economy. And many things have gone down. Not everything yet. Cheaper gasoline, moderation and lower rental costs and shelter costs, declines in purchase of used cars, household furnishings, anything having to do with motor vehicles, down. Places that are resisting, and they're either staying the same or going up a little, airline fares, hospital services, and food, which is up 2.9%, which is not, okay, it's supposed to, the perfect number is 2%. 2.9 is not terribly far off. And the overall inflation number, I actually think when they readjust this, it may get right down to 2%. It's about 2.3 now, which no one anticipated. They thought it would be 2.6, which is very, very different. So there's a lot more to cover. There's so much more I want to tell you, but I want you to go to Dr. Maria right now because she's got a very, very good show on Lindell TV. I know what it's about. It's stuff that will just complete what I'm saying here. And I want you to have a great weekend. I really do. And I want you to spend a little time praying to him, okay? Because that's what Sunday's for, right? That's the day he rested, and that's the day he wants you to spend a little time really thinking. I mean, you should think about him every day, but that's the day you should really think about him. Because we need him. That's the single biggest thing we need. We need God and Jesus Christ back in America. Okay, so pray for Israel. Pray for Ukraine. Please pray for Iran. Pray for us. And I want you to pray for our president, because whether you love him and know him the way I do, or you don't even like him, he's our president. We want him to succeed. If he succeeds, we succeed until the next president comes along. So pray for him, that he succeeds, that he continues to have the strength and the wisdom and the judgment to do the remarkable things that he's doing. And the pressure on him, if you don't empathize with him, I don't know. But at least pray for him. So God bless America. We'll see you on Monday. Maybe before. We'll see. It's our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought to us the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained, by rational principles, the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the Kingdom of Great Britain and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, for freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the ability to select the people who govern them. And he explained it in ways that were understandable to all the people, not just the elite. Because the desire for freedom is universal. The desire for freedom adheres in the human mind, and it is part of the human soul. This is exactly the time we should consult our history. Look at what we've done in the past and see if we can't use it to help us now. We understand that our founders created the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest democracy, the freest country, a country that has taken more people out of poverty than any country ever. All of us are so fortunate to be Americans. But a great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we're able to reason, we're able to talk, we're able to analyze. We are able to